Good morning, Revolution, and welcome to our show this morning. I hope everybody had a good week and you're getting ready for a great July 4th holiday weekend. If you're going anywhere, please drive safely and stay safe. We got a lot to talk about this morning. There was the uh, emergency hearings on July the 6th. There's the closing session of the Supreme Court. Oh my goodness. We'll get back to that in just a second. The NATO Summit, and finally, Brittney Griner, who's the young athlete, professional basketball player who's in jail in Russia. I believe she appears in court today. And then, of course, uh, we have our question of the week from our readers and supporters, and some people who don't support us. But if you got a question, we're willing to answer it. So please send it in. Folks, uh, that hearing, what was it, on Wednesday, Tuesday? Anita was a game
Mhm.
changer, oh, wasn't it?
I hope it was a game changer, Joe. It was really riveting television to see the revelations that Ms. Hutchinson made were really was really stunning. And I think one of the biggest ones was that Donald Trump, our former president, knew that there was an armed and dangerous mob, and he was begging to lead it to the Capitol in some sort of you know I don't know, blockbuster movie, wannabe thing. It was just amazing and just really revelatory. And I hope that it gives our I hope it gives Merrick Garland enough ammunition to prosecute, because right now Donald Trump is still the front runner for the Republican nomination for president in 2024. And we just can't let that happen, especially given what we've heard on Tuesday.
I hear he and the senator from Florida, what's that joker's name? Are running neck and neck now in the polls.
Oh, the
Senator or
governor
governor from
DeSantis.
Florida?
Oh, the
Oh, governor.
governor
DeSantis.
of
Yeah.
Florida. Yeah, the governor. What's his name?
DeSantis.
DeSantis.
DeSantis. Are running a neck and neck. But be that as it may, Rosanna, were you surprised by anything you heard from Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony?
I was very surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised of the things she said. I was just surprised that there was actually somebody brave enough to come forward and say those things. I'm not surprised that he knew there was weapons. I'm not surprised that he thought he was going to walk into the White House, movie-like kind of stepping in as president. He was really had that illusion of that. But I'm really surprised that there was somebody brave enough, as close to his cabinet and advisors and stuff, to really put put forth the reality. And I'm hoping that the American people are really listening, or something um, clicks and understands the dangers that he poses, and the danger that he put all of the members of Congress and the United States uh, with this action.
Scott, turning point or too soon to tell?
Um, Kind of too soon to tell. I thought the really damning thing was when he um, told the told the Secret Service, right, to turn off the metal detectors,
The
and
mag.
said, "Yeah, I know they're carrying weapons. Um, they're not here to hurt me." Uh, so I mean, and that for me, that's really the linchpin of the whole case that they're trying to make, which is that this was not something that just happened. This was very organized. He knew about it. His circle knew about it, um, and yeah, it has to be prosecuted. Just bringing it to light, as good as it is, just trusting it to the court of public opinion is not good enough. It has to be there has to be a criminal trial.
Is Merrick Garland, Anita, you raised whether or not he would bring charges to follow up on Scott's point. Don't you think he's in a kind of a tough spot? I mean, what if they bring charges, prosecute, and they lose? Anita?
Yeah, wow, that would be well, I think it would be better than not even trying. I yes, it is a delicate situation to have a new administration prosecute the old one, like Donald Trump used to always say, lock her up or send them to prison or whatever. I mean, that's just an unseemly kind of thing, but we have to do it. We have to just stop him from running for office again and again putting the country in jeopardy like that. And I mean, if he does succeed, it's just more power for the fascist forces. It's not just Trump alone. It's a whole movement of the ruling class to really establish their primacy in this country. It's scary, and he would enable it. Another term would just seal our fate. So I really think we have to just try to go after him as much as we can.
That's a really important point. It's a movement of the ruling class and not just Trump. But let's continue this with a lightning round. Rosanna, prosecute or not? I mean, if they lose, he will have been acquitted of charges 3 times, 2 impeachments, and then a federal prosecution for obstruction of justice, sedition, and God knows what else. Wouldn't that strengthen him?
Well, I would think not, because it's so much has been exposed, and it would help prepare the American people for other such characters like him. DeSantis is another one that's just kind of doing whatever he wants to do there in Florida. So I would think that this would be a learning lesson for the American people of not just not just reacting because something sounds good, but thinking through it to see what implications it has for the future and for the working class as a whole.
Scott, prosecute or not, given the stakes?
Absolutely prosecute. Think about how long it took people marching in the streets, rallies, petitions over and over again, um, demanding that killer cops be brought to justice, even when for a while it looked like they were never actually going to be convicted. Never actually going to be indicted in the first place, and then never going to be convicted. And now we're starting to actually get convictions. This is about this idea that the ruling class and its forces, its lackeys, whatever, can act with impunity. It has to be stopped. It's a very important to prosecute, even if you know even if they lose, it's still a step forward.
Okay, but y'all be careful, because what's going to happen if the Republicans win the presidency and they win the House and they win the Senate and you prosecute Trump and you lose, you set a precedent, and the next thing that's going to happen is that they're going to prosecute Barack Obama for killing that boy up off the, well, I don't know if I forget where it was, in the Middle East or wherever, with that drone strike.
So, are they going to not do that? If I mean, I'm not sure that the Republicans are going to, like, trusting that they'll, like, respect our restraint.
They don't respect a goddamn thing. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm for prosecuting, but I think that you have to acknowledge given the political climate and the dangers inherent in it, that once you set a precedent, watch out, because it's going to be, if you don't defeat the extreme right and these fascist elements, and that's the real question, how do you defeat them? As you used to say, Scott, and maybe I'm sure you still say it, and it's not just any old defeat, it has to be a decisive defeat. If that don't happen, y'all, and therefore we need to help think through a platform and program for achieving that decisive defeat. that's why I keep raising the issue of, um, you know, people like Liz Cheney and the head of the Senate and others who, and all of those right wingers who aided and abetted and facilitated these policies for the last 40 years. You got to address the inherently anti-democratic right-wing nature of that party. Racism, sexism, homophobia, uh,
Speaking of the Supreme Court,
speaking of, which is next. Now, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge the swearing in of the new African American Judge Brown. Big development, you know. And congratulations to her. I'm going to say it again. Congratulations to her. But oh my God, you talk about an activist court on Native American sovereignty, out the door on regulation of greenhouse gas emissions, no more. What else did they do? They um, uh, well,
Roe v. Wade.
that's enough, um, and the implications of it, Anita. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the EPA, is it?
Yeah, it's really returning. The Supreme Court is really showing its ruling class, fealty here by overturning Roe v. Wade. Really takes away rights, workers' rights from half of the workforce. Just removes their opportunity for bodily autonomy. That's huge. It's a huge blow to the working class. And then they show how loyal they are to the oil and gas companies and extraction, and how hostile they are to any kind of regulation. This idea of major questions doctrine that says that no bold initiative can take place in any of those executive agencies unless Congress specifically says that that's what they're supposed to do. And of course, the Supreme Court, since they've allowed partisan gerrymandering, they have, created a Congress that is not going to do the people's will.
True. But Scott, there is a idea, there's a method to what we perceive as their madness. For them, it's not madness; it's reason.
no, it's very very reasonable, um, and it seems to me that we insist when we talk about fascism that there's a clear line of demarcation, right, between a democratic, a bourgeois democratic state and a fascist state. There's a substitution of one form of power for another. In reality, and that informs the way we think about the extreme right. Distinguishing between the fascist forces, who say stormed the Capitol on January 6th and organized that, and a reactionary camp within the bourgeois democratic constellation or whatever. But that line is getting really blurry with these Supreme Court decisions, especially with I think they issued one on voting rights as well. That was another blow to the Voting Rights Act, which the Texas Republican Party has called for repealing altogether. So there's this attempt to kind of lock in this violent dictatorial form of rule through superficially democratic means, and that's something that might deserve attention. But this is the long game that the Republicans have been playing with packing the Supreme Court, to be able, and the state houses, so that now they have this direct pipeline where they can get any crazy law passed in a state legislature under Republican control, and then it gets challenged in court and blocked and then appealed and blocked and eventually gets to a Supreme Court dominated by reactionary forces, thanks to Mitch McConnell and his control of the Senate.
Long game is to, as Steve Bannon, who must be smiling, is to dismantle the administrative state. Dismantle the administrative state. They want to roll back. It's not just the EPA, health and safety, any federal agency that was set up over the last 40, 50, out the window, Rosanna. Happy days for the ruling class will be here again. And that means that voting rights, women's rights, LGBTQ, marriage, you name it, environmental regulation, out the door, bye-bye, you know? And Rosanna, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, Joe, how come the Communist Party keeps raising these wedge issues? I mean, y'all keep talking about abortion. It's a wedge issue. Don't you know that jobs are important? Don't you know that healthcare is important? I mean, how would you respond to something like that? I mean, aren't women half to, as Anita just pointed out, half the working class? And if you deal with, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but somehow your signal got cut off, so I didn't quite hear did you say wedge issues?
Wedge issues, like,
Yeah.
issues of racism, sexism, homophobia, these issues with respect to education, and so on and so forth.
Well,
That's
you
all
can't,
everybody deals with.
yeah. You can't profess to be, for the working class without raising these issues. It's what's affecting the working class in the here and now. We have to deal with those. We have to be able to be part of that movement. Otherwise, how can you build anything if you're, somewhere on the outside, waving a red flag without any substance, without any proof that you are serious about defending the working class and looking out for the rights of the working class, which, all of this, the working class encompasses.
The
Anita,
wedge.
arise from a misunderstanding of Marxism. I mean, you can shout from the rooftop, class, 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 until you're blue in the face, if you're able to get blue in the face. But that doesn't mean that you're following a Marxist point of view. In fact, isn't there a tendency within the left that historically has held that position?
Did you mention me here? Economic determinism is what we're talking about there. The class struggle is a very complex matter in contemporary society, and we cannot ignore nationally oppressed minorities and the different dynamics of how the class struggle manifests in terms of the struggle for African American liberation, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. All of that is factored in, and sometimes just focusing, with blinders on to class alone or economic factors alone really blinds you to these dynamics in society, how the ruling class is actually waging its war against the working class.
Scott, what were you going to say about wedge issues?
I was saying the wedge is white supremacy. The wedge is homophobia. The wedge is male supremacy and misogyny. Inequality is what divides the working class. And the deliberate, conscious attempt by the ruling class to stoke those kinds of ideologies and prop up inequality. That's what divides us. That's the wedge that we've got to get away from. So fighting for the rights of women, of racially and nationally oppressed people, of LGBTQ folks, those are basic things. Like the watchword of the working class movement has always been, an injury to one is an injury to all. And if we really believe that, how can we say that the stripping away of bodily autonomy from women isn't an injury to the whole class, as Anita said? These issues of equality are so tightly caught up with the class struggle that they're indissociable from it.
The working class is multiracial, y'all. Is multi-gendered. It's multinational, made up of different nationalities. Get over it. And by the way, 2050, we're not going to be talking about racial minorities. We're going to be talking about racial majorities, Latinos, African Americans, Asians, and so on and so forth. You cannot stop the march of history. You cannot stop the forces of capitalism, which is objectively pushing workers together in the process of production, outside of the process of production. The tendency of people coming together, it's inevitable. That's why children born from parents of different quote unquote races, marriages of people of different quote unquote race is increasing, because that's the march of history. And if y'all think you can stop it, you can no more stop that than you can stop the tide coming in. I mean, it's impossible. And that's one thing. And the other thing is, we will never reach socialism unless we have a united working class. And we will never get a united working class unless you deal with the problems of women, Black folk, Latinos, Asian. You won't get there, people. It's not possible. Wake up. Come out that dream world. Okay, NATO Summit, over. Biden's coming back to Washington. Sweden, Turkey relented. Sweden is going into NATO. Looks like Finland going into NATO. Good thing or bad thing? Who wants to answer that question?
I will. I think it's a bad thing, Joe, because I just think this rush to militarizing Europe and everything outside of Russia, or posing themselves as the enemy of Russia. It's just adding to the conflict. I really think we need to draw back, let Russia work on. Let Russia and Ukraine work on some kind of an end to this that will enable trade to resume, and African nations to have a better food security, for example. I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications of this war. People are suffering from it all over the world, and we really need to, instead of throwing gas on the flames, we should really help resolve the conflict.
Scott, I think Mr. Putin may have miscalculated. They wanted to weaken NATO. Now it looks like it's going to be strengthened.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it's, the strengthening of NATO NATO should not exist. Even the point of its existence within the logic of the capitalist class, the overt point of its existence, to contain and hold back the Soviet Union, that was gone 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Like, why is it still, why is it expanded up until now, and why is it still expanding, including not just welcoming in Sweden and Finland, but also looking toward Australia, I believe. And we see this mirrored in the attempts by the ideologues and pundits of the ruling class to keep linking Russia and China, right? It's the West, which is actually half of it in the East, apparent. Who knows? But against Russia and China, and that's a really dangerous. It's just like Anita said. It's throwing gas on the flames. This is going to lead us into another war, and it's the price is already too high in terms of um, rising food prices, rising gas prices. It's awful,
To,
awful move.
But the only
to
solution is
me,
to go ahead, Rosanna.
to me, at the core of all of this is the weapons manufacturers. They stand to gain huge amount of profits, which is something that many people don't address, is that there's profit to be made, and that's why they're building these things, and that's why they're going preparing for some war. They're looking for some war somewhere if this issue with Ukraine and Russia is solved, or comes to an end. They have to find some other way to build those arms to really tax the people of the United States. We pay 52 cents out of every dollar of our tax dollars goes to the military, and that profit, that money is really going to the weapons manufacturers. A great majority of it. The Pentagon doesn't have to account for the majority of that money. So I think that we have to also shed light on that part of it, because that's at the core. In my opinion, that's at the core of this whole thing.
I agree with you 100%. And we can never forget that the Congress voted to increase the military budget above and beyond what Biden and them asked for, which was already way, way too much. And the Democratic caucus in the House have split over the issue. Half of them joined the Republicans and voted for that increase. I forget, it was $60 billion or something. And the other half said no. And so the point I'm trying to make is that there's a basis for building a peace movement. There were protests over Biden's Cold War policy towards China. Bernie Sanders said no. 30 environmental and other organizations said no a year and a half ago, before the Russian invasion. And that sentiment still exists. It was complicated now by that war, but that sentiment is still out there. And one of the things that we have to figure out, along with other peace-loving forces, is how to build a peace movement in this country, deal with those military corporations, and transfer those monies to human needs. Speaking of developments in Russia, NBA star player Brittney Griner got caught with some marijuana product or something in a bag or in a purse. And now she's in a Russian prison, which is tantamount to a death sentence. Because if you know anything about those prisons, if you've read anything, seen any, they are hothouses of tuberculosis and all kinds of other diseases. And I understand that some people have been brought home, but she's still languishing in prison. She goes to court today, and I think that we need to be part of the movement, Anita, for calling for the State Department to do whatever they need to do in order to bring her home.
Free Brittany. Apparently, the State Department's not doing a very good job either, because Brittany Griner tried to call her wife numerous times. It was an arrangement that the Russians had agreed to, but the U.S. Embassy forgot to staff a certain phone or something like that. So the opportunity was lost for them to talk for the first time in 4 months since she was arrested with traces of hashish oil, is what I read in the paper, which is just, inside a vape cartridge or something like that, just uh, the most minor reason to pick somebody up like that. It's just, it was opportunism on the part of the Russian government, no doubt. And I hope that we have to demand that the State Department and everybody else do everything they can to free this woman.
Free Brittany.
Free Brittany, right?
We need an editorial on it, Scott, Rosanna, Anita. Anybody out there want to write one? We need your contribution. By the way, before we leave NATO, there's an international movement against NATO. While the summit was taking place, our young people from our youth organizations, from the World Federation of Democratic Youth and others, held an anti-NATO summit in Spain. We had a representative there. They had a big protest. And so that movement is growing. And you will be able to read about it in the People's World and at cpusa.org. Let's go to our question of the week. And it went something like this. I read in the Marxist IQ that you all favor a multi-party state under socialism. But doesn't socialism call for a one-party state? And if so, what are y'all talking about? Scott?
Socialism calls for the control of the means of production, the economic and political life of the country by the working class. No more, no less. Whether that takes the form of a one-party state or a multi-party state is, a question of the history of each nation, of the forces that are in the struggle for socialism, of the democratic forms that exist before that. So no, there's no a one-party state has no necessary connection to socialism.
Rosanna, how you gonna have a dictatorship of the proletariat with multi-parties?
I think that we can speculate about what socialism is going to look like, or, we can spend our time daydreaming. But I think the important thing is to understand that the working class is going to decide what steps are necessary to transform this society to a socialist one. And so we can't be definite about anything that's going to happen. We just have to be able to say that we have to, know that the working class the party's not going to decide on its own. We can have all kinds of ideas, but it's the working class that's going to make those decisions. And we have to be mindful of that and be open to that when that happens.
I agree 100%. There are two conditions for socialism, Anita. Condition number one, working class power in the state and government. Condition number two, working class control and ownership of the quote unquote, this is a phrase, I hate phrases, main means of production, big industry, banks, so on and so forth. The form of government depends on the history and culture and of each country. No?
Plus the forms, political parties are just organizations of people working in their common interests. And I think the political party form really that we have right now in the United States really depends on the base that it's in, which is a capitalist society. And I'm thinking about Cuba. In Cuba, I'm not even sure what the party situation is, but they do have plenty of organizations like the Organization of Cuban Women, or organizations of certain kinds of workers, for example. So they still participate as groups, as organizations in the government and in the political process. I think the idea of a political party has to be transformed in different under different forms of political economy.
Just the reality is, even in China and in the GDR and other countries, there are other political parties who participate in the political process. The idea that it's just one party is just not real. I mean, it's just not real, people. Check your
And
facts. Go ahead.
the idea that our
30 seconds.
the United States in particular, still limping and stumbling its way out of a fascist coup, with reactionaries in power all over the place, is in any position to proclaim its system as a model of democracy, is also ludicrous. Like, socialism is going to be a complete transformation of our system of political power.
And Rosanna made a very important point. We have to be wary of being speculative. You got what's going to happen will depend on how circumstances that develop at that particular time and what comes after. And the past can help inform that, but it won't determine it. By the way, had it not been for the Civil War in Russia and the intervention of 21 countries, Russia would be a multi-party state during the socialist era. It was only because some of the forces went over to the counter-revolution that they stopped, that they outlawed the other parties in conditions of civil war. And that persisted, as the country developed under Stalin and Brezhnev and the rest of them. So that does it for this week. Enjoy your barbecue on Sunday or Monday. Don't drink too much beer. If you drink, don't drive. Stay strong. Stay safe. Stay in the fight. See you next week, y'all.
See you later, comrades.